Sir, could you pretend to be my dad, just for one day? A billionaire paused. A child's question shattered his perfection and awakened the humanity he thought was gone forever. In a world measured by seconds and margins, Edward Cole had built a fortress against anything unpredictable. Every meeting timed, every decision flawless. But one ordinary afternoon, a single voice shattered his perfect symmetry. Sir, could you pretend to be my dad, just for one day? That question didn't just stop a billionaire's schedule. It cracked open a past he'd buried, and a future he never expected to build. This isn't just a story about a businessman and a little girl. It's the story of how precision met chaos, and how one promise changed everything. And before I forget, where are you watching from today? Leave a comment below. Enjoy the story. A man who erased his past is asked to build a future. Edward Cole measured his life in seconds, and he was 45 seconds behind. This delay, caused by a simple cashier, was an irritation he would not tolerate. The boardroom was silent. Sunlight sliced across a 20-foot mahogany table, reflecting off the glass walls that overlooked the city. Edward Cole stood at the head of the table. He was a man tailored in quiet, expensive gray. His presence filled the room, cold and absolute. Peterson, Edward said, his voice quiet. Quiet was always worse than loud. The projection margin in the fourth quarter summary was off. A man named Peterson, sweating in his own expensive suit, shifted. Sir, it was only 0.2%. A minor rounding. 0.2%, Edward interrupted, is $1.4 million. Your minor rounding is the cost of an entire department. It is waste. I do not tolerate waste. He adjusted the cuff of his shirt. He did not yell. He never needed to. His disappointment was a heavy weight that settled on everyone in the room. Fix it, and do not bring me close enough again. He turned. Ms. Jennings, his assistant, sharp and efficient, stepped forward. Sir, your car is waiting. The meeting with the Board of Regents is at 1:30. I know what time the meeting is, he said. He disliked being reminded. He started for the door, then paused. And the water in this office is unacceptable. The filter is off. I can taste the minerals. I will have it replaced, sir. I'll get my own. He swept out of the room, leaving a trail of chilled silence behind him. His associates breathed out, as if they had been holding their breath the entire time he was there. Edward Cole did not like chaos. He did not like errors. He did not like surprises. His life was a fortress of precision, built to keep the messiness of the world out. He had spent decades perfecting it. He stepped out of his building, bypassing his waiting car and driver. The corner market was faster. He just needed one bottle of imported, still water. Glass, not plastic. It was a simple, controllable request. The market was the opposite of his office. It was loud. It smelled of coffee and ripening bananas. The line was long, filled with people moving too slowly. He felt a familiar knot of impatience tighten in his chest. Finally, he reached the counter. One bottle. Still water. Imported. Glass. The cashier, a young man with headphones around his neck, nodded. He scanned a bottle and slid it toward Edward. Edward looked down. The bottle was green. The label read, sparkling. He placed his hand firmly on the bottle and pushed it back. Excuse me, he said. His voice was cool and clipped. I ordered still water. This is sparkling. The cashier blinked, looking at the receipt in his hand, flustered. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. You thought wrong, Edward said. His tone was sharp, but not raised. And now I am late. Behind him, the line grew restless. A low hum of New York murmurs began. Frustrated sighs. Impatient glances. Edward Cole did not care. Precision was his currency. Errors, no matter how small, were not acceptable. Then, a voice cut through the tense air. It was tiny, high-pitched, and startlingly clear. Sir, could you pretend to be my daddy? Just for one day. Edward froze. The sound was so out of place. It was like a bird flying into his sterile boardroom. He turned. Standing just a few feet away was a little girl, perhaps 8 years old. She had messy blonde hair pulled into a crooked ponytail and was wearing a faded blue hoodie. Her eyes, wide and serious, looked up at him with a terrifying sincerity. Behind her, a woman rushed forward, breathless. Sophie. Oh, goodness. Sophie, come here. The woman's face was flushed with panic. She grabbed the child's shoulder. Sweetheart, you cannot run off like that. You can't talk to strangers. The woman looked up at Edward, her eyes wide with fear. She wore a simple, worn beige coat. Underneath, Edward recognized the dark blue polo shirt of the ever-clean maid service. The same service that cleaned his own office building. She was exhausted. He could see the faint lines of fatigue around her eyes. But she held herself with a weary dignity. I am so sorry, sir, the woman said, pulling the little girl, Sophie, back toward her. She just says things sometimes. She didn't mean. Yes, I did, Sophie interrupted. She was not crying. She was stating a fact. Tomorrow is Bring Your Hero Day at school. All the other kids are bringing their daddies. I don't have one. She looked at Edward's expensive gray suit. You look important. You look like a hero. Edward stared at her. For a full 10 seconds, he forgot about the water. He forgot the line. He forgot his 1:30 meeting. He was a man who commanded billions, but he was completely disarmed by an 8-year-old child. There was no fear in her. Everyone was afraid of him. His employees, his competitors, even his own board. But this child looked at him like he was a solution. We'll go, the woman said, her voice shaking. She was trying to steer Sophie toward the door. We're so sorry to bother you. Wait. Edward said the word before he had processed it. The woman and child froze. Edward looked directly at the woman. He had seen her before. In the halls of his building, late at night, pushing a cart. You work for Everclean, he stated. She flinched, as if he had accused her of a crime. Yes, sir. My name is Claire. Claire Miller. I clean offices. I didn't mean for her to bother you. We're not asking for anything, I promise. Mommy, Sophie whispered, tugging on her mother's coat. Ask him. Claire's eyes filled with tears of pure frustration. Sophie, please. Not now. Edward looked at the girl. What is your name? Sophie Miller, she said. The name Miller. It was common, but something about the mother's face, the desperation mixed with pride, made him ask. Your husband, he said quietly. Sophie's father. Claire's chin lifted. He passed away. When she was 2, he was in the service. What was his name? David, she said, her voice soft. David Miller. Edward's expression, usually locked in place, shifted. David Miller. From the 101st. Claire's eyes went wide. How did you know that? Edward didn't answer. He was looking at Sophie. Your great-grandfather, he said, was Michael Miller. It wasn't a question. We call him Iron Mike, Sophie said proudly. He was a big hero. Mommy has his medal in a box. The line in the store had gone completely silent. The cashier was watching, wide-eyed. Edward stood still. Iron Mike Miller. The name was a legend. A name his own father, a veteran himself, had spoken with a reverence reserved for saints. Michael Miller had saved his entire platoon in a firefight decades ago. He was a man of true, uncomplicated honor. And this was his great-granddaughter, wearing mismatched socks and asking a stranger to be her father. Her mother, his descendant, was scrubbing floors to survive. He looked at his watch. 1:17 p.m. He saw his own life. The sterile apartment. The empty meetings. The echo of footsteps in a hall that never waited for anyone. He had spent years perfecting the art of walking away. Tomorrow, he said slowly, his voice rough. What time is Hero Day? Claire stammered. What? Sir, no. You don't have to. I don't know what to say. 10 a.m. Sophie shouted, her face lighting up like the sun. At PS 114. On the corner. Edward nodded once. I will be there. Really? Sophie whispered. I will be there, he repeated. But, he added, looking down at her with a hint of his usual sharpness, I expect you to have a schedule for this event. I do not do chaos. Sophie giggled. Edward turned, left the sparkling water on the counter, and walked out of the store. He did not have his water. He had just ruined his afternoon schedule, and he had just made a promise he never saw coming. In his car, the silence was heavy. His driver, Sam, had been with him for 10 years. Sir, Sam asked, looking at him in the rearview mirror. The meeting with the regents? Cancel it, Edward said. Sam's eyes widened. Sir, the merger. Reschedule. Tell them something unavoidable has come up. And Sam, clear my schedule for tomorrow. 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Yes, sir. Sam turned, his face a mask of professionalism, but his mind reeling. Edward Cole had not canceled a merger meeting in a decade. Edward stared out the window at the city rushing by. Iron Mike Miller. He hadn't thought of that name in years. He wasn't doing this for the girl. he told himself. He was doing this out of respect for the name. It was about honor. It was about a debt he didn't know he owed. He felt a strange crackling in his chest, like ice breaking. It was an unfamiliar and deeply annoying sensation. That evening, Claire and Sophie sat at their tiny kitchen table. Their apartment was small, but clean. The ever-clean polo shirt was hanging to dry over the sink. "Sophie," Claire said, her voice still trembling. "You can't do things like that. That man, that's Edward Cole." "Who's that?" Sophie asked, coloring in a drawing. He owns the company I clean for. He's one of the richest men in the city. He's not the kind of person you just talk to." "He was nice," Sophie said. "He was precise," Claire corrected. "He's not going to show up, sweetheart. Men like that don't. They have more important things to do." "He promised," Sophie said, not looking up from her drawing. She held up the paper. It was a drawing of 3 people. A woman, a little girl, and a tall man in a gray suit. Claire's heart ached. She was terrified he wouldn't show up. It would break Sophie's heart. And a tiny, secret part of her was terrified that he would. The next morning, the clock on Edward Cole's wall chimed. It was 5 a.m. The chime was a soft, digital tone, calibrated to the exact second. His apartment was a vast space of glass and gray stone overlooking Central Park. There were no photographs. There were no stacks of magazines. There was no clutter. It was less a home and more a high-end containment facility. He rose, showered, and dressed. His routine was a ritual. He selected a suit from a closet that held 20 identical gray suits and 40 identical white shirts. Then he stopped. He looked at the suit in his hand. He imagined standing in a public school gymnasium. The image was jarring. It was an error in judgment. A suit like this was a statement of power. It would be seen as arrogance. It was, in a word, imprecise. He opened another closet. This one was almost empty. It held clothes he rarely wore. He pulled out a pair of dark wool slacks, a crisp white shirt, and a simple, black cashmere sweater. He put them on. He looked in the mirror. He felt exposed, unprotected. He added a dark blazer, structured and severe. It was the closest he could get to armor. He went to his kitchen, a laboratory of stainless steel, and drank 1 glass of filtered water. Not the imported kind. The filter in his apartment was, of course, perfect. He looked at his daily schedule, displayed on a screen built into the wall. 7 a.m., market analysis, global. 8:30 a.m., call with Tokyo Exchange. 10 a.m. PS 114. Hero Day. 1:30 p.m., rescheduled Regents meeting. That 10 a.m. entry looked like a typo. A piece of graffiti on a marble wall. He felt the familiar nod of impatience. Why was he doing this? The name, Iron Mike Miller, surfaced in his mind. He remembered his own father, a man who had built a small fortune through grit and iron. His father had respected very few people. Most men just make money. Edward, his father had told him once, swirling a glass of brandy. They're weak. They forget what matters. A real man understands debt. Not money debt. The other kind. The kind that gets paid in blood and honor. His father had pointed to a framed, black and white photo on his desk. A young man in uniform. Michael Miller. He saved my older brother's life. He saved our whole name. You see that name, Edward? You honor it. Edward looked at the clock. 6:15 a.m. This is a debt, he said to the empty room. He was honoring the Miller name. This was not emotion. It was a transaction. In a small apartment across the river, the morning was chaos. The smell of burnt toast filled the air. Claire Miller was rushing, trying to get Sophie's lunch packed, trying to fix the crooked ponytail in her blonde hair. Claire hadn't slept. She had spent the night wrestling with a terrible, vibrating anxiety. She was the maid. He was the owner. She had seen him once before, months ago, striding through the lobby of his building. He didn't look at people like her. He looked through them. Now, her daughter had demanded his time. He had said yes. But people like that didn't mean yes. Yes was a way to end an awkward conversation. He wouldn't come. She had to prepare Sophie. Sweetheart, she said, kneeling, her hands fumbling with the elastic in Sophie's hair. You know, Hero Day is mostly about telling stories. I know, Sophie said. She was vibrating with excitement, wearing her best dress, a blue one with yellow flowers. So if Mr. Cole is busy, that's okay. You can just tell everyone about Great-Grandpa Mike. He's the real hero. Sophie stopped wiggling. She looked at her mother in the mirror. But Mr. Cole promised, Mommy. I know, baby. But his job is very big. He has meetings. He might have an emergency. He'll come, Sophie said, her faith absolute. He said I needed a schedule. I made one. She pulled a piece of construction paper from her backpack. It was folded in half. On the front, she had drawn a tall stick figure in a gray suit, holding hands with a little stick figure. Claire's heart broke. Okay, baby. Okay, let's go. They walked the 3 blocks to the school. Claire held Sophie's hand. Claire's palm was sweating. Sophie's was dry and warm. PS 114 was an old brick building. A banner hung over the door, painted by children. Our heroes welcome. The gymnasium was already filling up. The air was loud with children's voices and the smell of floor wax and coffee. Claire saw the other parents. There were men in military uniforms, firefighters, a police officer. There were moms in nursing scrubs and business suits. There were dads in construction boots and dads in ties. Claire and Sophie stood by the entrance. 9:55 a.m. The principal was walking toward the microphone. Claire's stomach turned to ice. He wasn't coming. She felt a terrible, burning shame. She had let Sophie believe. Okay, Soph, she whispered, her voice thick. It's time to find our seats. We'll just. Sophie's face, so bright moments before, crumpled. Her lower lip began to tremble. She was staring at the door, her faith finally cracking. He promised, she whispered. Claire felt tears sting her own eyes. I know, sweetheart. I'm so sore. A car door slammed outside. It wasn't a normal sound. It was the heavy, solid thud of a car that cost more than their apartment building. A few parents by the door turned to look. Through the wired glass of the gym doors, Claire saw it. A black car, sleek and silent as a shark. It was so out of place in front of their school, it looked like a mistake. The driver, Sam, got out. He walked around and opened the back door. Edward Cole stepped onto the sidewalk. He was not in his usual gray suit. He wore the dark blazer and slacks. He looked stiff, severe, and deeply uncomfortable. He adjusted his cuffs, his eyes scanning the school building as if it were a hostile territory. Every parent in the gym who had turned to look went silent. They didn't know who he was, but they knew he was someone. Sophie gasped. He came. Her voice, pure joy, cut through the entire gym. Before Claire could stop her, Sophie dropped her backpack and ran. She bolted out the gym doors, across the small lobby, and launched herself toward the sidewalk. Edward saw her coming. He was not a man who was approached by running children. He visibly braced, his shoulders tensing. Sophie didn't hug him. She stopped, skidding to a halt a perfect 2 feet in front of him. She was beaming so hard her face looked like it might split in two. You came, she said. You're not late. You're exactly on time. Edward looked down at this small, blonde, 8-year-old child. He looked past her at Claire, who was standing in the doorway, pale and frozen, looking like she might be sick. He gave Claire a single, sharp nod. He was here. The transaction had begun. I have the schedule, Sophie said, her voice serious. She unfolded the piece of construction paper. Edward looked at it. It was written in wobbly purple crayon. 1. Walk in. 2. Sit. No wiggles. 3. My turn. 4. Smile. The E was missing. He looked at the drawing of himself. The crayon man had a very stern, straight line for a mouth. He felt that strange, annoying crackle in his chest again. Chaos, he muttered. No, Sophie said seriously. It's a list. Very well, Edward said. He held out his hand. Sophie stared at it. Item 1, Edward said, his voice clipped. Walk in. We are on a schedule. Sophie's smile returned. She slipped her small, warm hand into his. His hand was large, manicured, and cold. Her tiny fingers wrapped around one of his. He looked down at her hand, then up at the school. He took a deep breath. Together, the billionaire and the maid's daughter walked into the school, leaving Claire to follow, trembling, behind them. The noise in the gymnasium was a dull roar. Children were laughing, parents were chatting. The moment Edward Cole crossed the threshold, a wave of silence rolled out from the door. It was not a respectful silence. It was a silence of pure, blunt curiosity. Heads turned. The mother saw a man who looked like he had stepped out of a magazine. Tall, severe, and wearing a blazer that cost more than their mortgages. The father saw a man who radiated an uncomfortable, absolute authority. Mommy, Sophie called, still holding Edward's hand. We're in item 2 now. Sitting. Claire hurried over, her face pale. Sophie, quiet. Let's sit in the back. No, Edward said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the murmurs. He pointed with his chin toward a row of empty seats on the metal bleachers. We will sit there. It is efficient. A clear view. He was assessing the room like a general. Exits. Sidelines. Potential threats. The biggest threat, he decided, was the large coffee stain on the floor near his foot. He led the way. Claire and Sophie followed in his wake. He navigated the bleachers with a stiff, awkward grace, as if he expected the metal to collapse under his weight. He sat. He placed his hands on his knees. He stared straight ahead. Claire sat beside him, leaving a careful 6-inch gap between them. Sophie, oblivious, scrambled over and sat between them, pressing her small shoulder against Edward's arm. He flinched. A tiny, almost invisible muscle twitch in his jaw. He did not move away. You're not wiggling, Sophie whispered, looking up at him. I do not wiggle, Edward stated. The principal, a woman with a kind, flustered face, tapped the microphone. All right, everyone. Welcome to our annual Hero Day. We are so thrilled to celebrate the people who make our community great. The event began. A young man in a crisp blue uniform, a firefighter, went first. He held his helmet. He talked about his crew, about pulling a family from a fire last month. The children clapped. Next, a woman in bright blue scrubs. She was a nurse in the emergency room. She told a gentle story about helping a lost child find his mother in the hospital. With each speaker, Edward felt a growing sense of displacement. These people spoke of saving lives, of community, of service. He saved margins. He cut losses. He restructured debt. He glanced at Claire. She was watching the nurse, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her expression was one of quiet respect. She belonged here. He did not. He felt Sophie shift beside him. She was looking at him, not the stage. Are you bored? She whispered. I am focused, he replied. It's okay, she whispered back, patting his arm. Our part is next. It's the best one. Edward's stomach tightened. The transaction. He just had to get through the transaction. And next up, the principal said, looking at her clipboard, we have Sophie Miller. And her hero, Mr. Edward Cole. The gym applauded politely. Sophie sprang to her feet. Item 3, she said, grabbing Edward's hand again. She tugged. He stood. He felt like he was moving underwater. Every eye in the room was on him. He, a man who commanded boardrooms of sharks, suddenly felt the primal, irrational fear of public speaking. In a gym, he walked with Sophie to the small, carpeted stage set up under the basketball hoop. The microphone squeaked. Sophie took the microphone first. She was completely, terrifyingly fearless. Hi, she said, her voice booming. This is my hero. He's Mr. Cole. He's very, very important and very busy. A few parents chuckled. Edward remained perfectly still, his face a mask of iron control. He's not my real dad, Sophie continued, causing a ripple of confused murmurs. My real dad, David, is in heaven. He was a soldier. But Mr. Cole is my dad for today, because he promised. She looked up at him, her eyes shining with blind trust. And he never breaks a promise. That's a hero. She handed the microphone to Edward. He accepted it. The metal was cold. He stared at the crowd. They stared back. He saw the firefighters, the nurses, the parents. He saw Claire, her hands over her mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and something else. Pride. He cleared his throat. The sound was too loud. My name is Edward Cole, he began. His voice was flat. I am not a hero. I am not a soldier or a first responder. I am a businessman. He paused. What did a businessman say? He hated this. He hated the chaos, the emotion, the imprecision. Heroism, he continued, finding a new rhythm, is often misunderstood. It is not always a single, public act. It is not always about fires or emergencies. He found himself looking at Claire. She was holding her breath. Sometimes, he said, his voice lowering slightly, heroism is consistency. It is doing a job, no matter how small, with precision. It is showing up. Every day, it is finishing what you started. He was just talking, saying words, but they felt true. Sophie's father, he said, was David Miller. Her great-grandfather was Iron Mike Miller. They were men who understood duty. They were men who understood honor. They were men who finished what they started. He looked down at Sophie. That name is a name to be proud of. Sophie Miller comes from a line of heroes. I am just honoring a debt to that name. He stopped. He had said enough. He had said too much. He handed the microphone back to the principal, who looked at him, stunned. The gym was silent. Not curious, not confused. It was the silence of people who had just heard something they did not expect. Then, the firefighter in the front row began to clap. Slowly, firmly. Then the nurse. Then Claire, tears streaming down her face. Soon, the entire gym was applauding. It was not polite applause. It was real. Edward was frozen. He did not understand the sound. He had received applause for corporate victories. This was different. This felt warm. Sophie launched herself at his leg, wrapping her arms around his knee. Item 4, she yelled into his trousers. Smiling, he looked down at the top of her blonde head. He felt his face. The muscles were stiff and used. He tried. A small, awkward lifting at the corner of his mouth. It felt more like a grimace. Sophie looked up. You did it. You did it, Mr. Cole. He put a hand, almost unconsciously, on her head. The transaction was complete. He had done his part. He walked her back to their seat. He sat down. The principal continued, but Edward didn't hear her. He was aware of only two things, the echoing sound of the applause and the small, warm hand of Sophie Miller, which had once again found his and was holding on tight. He did not pull away. The event ended. The principal, wiping her eyes, thanked all the heroes. Parents and children moved toward a long table piled with cookies and jugs of orange juice. The gymnasium, which had been quiet with respect, erupted back into joyful chaos. The noise hit Edward Cole like a physical blow. He hated large crowds. He despised the smell of cheap sugar cookies and artificial juice. Mr. Cole, cookie. Sophie tugged on his blazer, pointing to the table. She was still, stubbornly, holding his hand. I do not eat cookies, he said, his tone clipped. He looked toward the exit. His schedule was blinking red in his mind. 11:15 a.m. He was 15 minutes behind his exit time. Sir. He turned. The firefighter who had spoken first was standing there. He was a tall man with a kind face, and he was holding 2 paper cups of juice. He offered one to Edward. Edward stared at the cup as if it were a biohazard. No. The man didn't flinch. He just smiled and set the cup down. That was a good speech. Finishing what you started. My dad used to say that. You a veteran, sir? I am not, Edward said. Huh. Well, you've got the bearing. Whatever you do, you're a good man for showing up for that kid. The firefighter nodded, giving Edward a look of simple, uncomplicated respect. He then turned to Sophie. And you picked a good one. He walked away, joining his own son. Edward stood frozen. He was used to being feared. He was used to being obeyed. He was not used to being called a good man by a stranger in a gymnasium. He didn't know what to do with it. Claire rushed over, her face still blotchy from crying. She looked mortified. Mr. Cole, I am so sorry. You can go. Please. You've done. I can't. I don't have the words. Thank you. She was wringing her hands, desperate to release him from his obligation. He looked at her. He saw the genuine, overwhelming gratitude in her eyes. It was a currency he never traded in. It made him deeply uncomfortable. He looked at Sophie, who was now looking at the cookies with a longing gaze. He made a decision. It was inefficient. It was illogical, but it was necessary. I will escort you home, he said. It was an order, not an offer. Claire's eyes went wide. Oh no, sir. You can't. We live just a few blocks away. You have your meeting. I am aware of my schedule, Ms. Miller, he said. He was already moving toward the door, his hand still firmly held by Sophie. It is on the way. It was not on the way. Come, Mommy, Sophie said, triumphant. We get to ride in the spaceship. The spaceship was a black Maybach S680. It was a silent, sealed chamber of hand-stitched leather and polished blackwood. His driver, Sam, held the door open, his face a perfect, professional mask. He did not even blink at the 8-year-old in the flowered dress. Claire hesitated, her hand on the door. She looked at her own worn coat, at the scuff on her shoe. Mr. Cole, it's too much. Get in the car, Ms. Miller, Edward said, his patience thinning. She got in. She sat on the absolute edge of the plush leather seat, as if she were afraid to leave an impression. Sophie, however, scrambled into the middle and immediately put her sneakers up on the seat. Sophie, feet down, Claire hissed, mortified. It's fine, Edward said, though his eye twitched. The car is cleaned daily. Sophie bounced. Wow, it's so quiet. It doesn't even feel like we're moving. She pointed to the illuminated panel in the armrest. What does this button do? Do not press the buttons, Edward commanded. Sophie immediately pulled her hand back. Okay. Sam pulled the car into traffic. The noisy, chaotic city street outside was completely muted, visible only through the tinted glass. It was like watching a movie of the world they had just left. The silence in the car was heavy. Sophie, as always, broke it. Did you like being my dad, Mr. Cole? Claire closed her eyes in second-hand embarrassment. Sophie, please. Edward stared out the window. He did not answer for a long time. The car turned onto Claire's street. The parameters of the arrangement were met. Sophie, he said finally. What's parameters? She asked. It means it was okay, Edward said, struggling. It was acceptable. Just acceptable? Sophie sounded disappointed. I thought you were great. You're the best pretend dad ever. Edward turned to look at her. I am the only pretend dad you have ever had. It is a data set of one. It is not a valid comparison. Sophie giggled. You talk funny. The car glided to a stop in front of a 5-story brick apartment building. The paint on the front door was peeling. A crack ran up the side of the concrete steps. Sam got out to open the doors. Claire scrambled out, pulling Sophie with her. Well, here we are. Thank you again, Mr. Cole. For everything. The ride. The school. Edward got out of the car. He stood on the sidewalk, a tall, severe figure in cashmere and wool, looking out of place among the row of parked cars and overflowing trash cans. He had finished the task. His 1:30 meeting was still viable if he left now. He should leave. He did not move. He looked at the building. He looked at Claire, fumbling for her keys. He looked at Sophie, who was watching him with wide, serious eyes. You work for Everclean, he stated, his eyes fixed on the peeling paint. In my building. Claire flinched, as if he had reminded her of her place. Yes, sir. Floors 40 through 45. His floors. He had an entire suite on 44. He had walked past this woman. He had looked through her. He realized with a jolt that she was the one who refilled the water filter he had complained about just yesterday. Mommy's the best cleaner, Sophie said proudly, sensing the shift in tone. She's a hero, too. She can get any stain out. Claire blushed, a deep, painful red. Sophie, that's enough. The metal, Edward said suddenly. Claire stopped fumbling with her keys. What? Your great-grandfather's medal. Iron Mike. The one Sophie said you keep in a box. Oh, yes. I have it. I would like to see it, Edward said. It was not a question. It was not a social request. It was a statement. He had created a new, pending task. Claire was stunned into silence. You want to see it? Now. No, Edward said, glancing at his watch. I have a meeting, but I will make time. It is a piece of history I wish to see. This, he told himself, was the real reason. The girl was a distraction. The school was a favor. The medal was about Iron Mike. It was about his father's words. You honor that name. Of course, Mr. Cole, Claire stammered. Anytime. It's just in a box, but you are welcome to see it. Good, he said. He gave a single, stiff nod. Good day, Ms. Miller. Sophie. He turned, got back into the car. The door shut with a silent, expensive thud. Sophie waved, a small, frantic motion, until the car turned the corner and disappeared. Claire stood on the sidewalk, her keys still in her hand. Her heart was beating so fast she felt dizzy. He is nice, Mommy. See, Sophie said, smiling. He's complicated, sweetheart, Claire whispered. She looked at the empty space where the car had been. She was terrified. Not of him, not anymore. She was terrified because, for the first time since her husband David died, she had felt a tiny, impossible spark of hope. And she knew that hope was the most dangerous, imprecise thing in the world. Edward Cole was 34 minutes late for the rescheduled Regents meeting. He did not apologize. He walked into the secondary conference room, and the 5 men and 2 women at the table, all powerful, all wealthy, stopped their nervous chatter. Gentlemen, ladies, Edward said, taking his seat. The acquisition of the biotech firm. Peterson, the numbers. Peterson, the same man from the 0.2% error, began his presentation. The slides were clean. The data was precise. The projections were exactly as Edward had demanded. It was a perfect, sterile, multi-billion-dollar strategic move. And Edward was bored. His mind, usually a steel trap that snagged every fractional point, was drifting. He kept seeing the chipped paint on Claire Miller's apartment building. He heard the squeak of the microphone in the gymnasium. The long-term yield, as you can see in figure 8.4, Peterson was saying, is projected to increase our market share by 12%. He's wearing mismatched socks. Edward blinked. He looked down the table. One of the regents, a man named Henderson, had his legs crossed. One sock was black. The other was dark blue. Edward had known Henderson for 5 years. He had never noticed his socks. Now, it was the only thing he could see. It was sloppy. It was an error. But his mind didn't register it as an error. It registered. Sophie Miller wears mismatched socks. Mr. Cole, Peterson asked, pausing. Your thoughts on the 12% projection? Edward focused. The room snapped back. It's acceptable, he said, using the word he had used in the car. It felt thin and wrong in this environment. He leaned forward. Your data is fine, Peterson, but the people are weak. Peterson looked confused. Sir? The biotech firm's leadership. No, Edward said, his voice sharp. Your presentation. It has no honor. It's just numbers. What is the point of this acquisition? Beyond the 12%? What does it do? The room was silent. Edward Cole had never asked, what does it do beyond the balance sheet? He was the man who had famously said, the point is profit. Everything else is poetry. It funds research, sir, a woman at the end of the table offered. Into degenerative nerve diseases. Edward stared at her. Good. Lead with that next time. He stood. The meeting was only halfway through. My office has the final approval. The projection is fine. The meeting is over. He walked out, leaving the regents bewildered. He returned to his own office, a vast corner room on the 44th floor. The sun was setting, painting the city in shades of orange and purple. His assistant, Ms. Jennings, stood as he entered. Sir, your 4 p.m. call with London is holding. Handle it, Edward said, loosening his tie. He had never loosened his tie in the office. Sir, handle it, Ms. Jennings. I am occupied. He went to his private bar, a sleek panel of black marble, and poured a glass of water. He tasted it. It was the new filter. It was fine. He thought of Claire Miller, the woman who had to clean his floors, who had to endure his complaint about the water, was the great-granddaughter of a man his father revered. He felt a hot, unfamiliar sensation. It was shame. He buzzed his assistant. Ms. Jennings, I have 2 tasks for you. Both are priority. Yes, sir. First, an employee of the Everclean service. Her name is Claire Miller. I want to know her employment status, her pay rate, and her performance record. Discreetly. Yes, sir. Is there a problem with her service? There is a discrepancy. I am handling it. Second, the principal of PS 114 in Queens. Find her name. Arrange a donation from the Cole Foundation. How much, sir? Enough to fix the peeling paint and the sound system, Edward said. A hero day should not be chaotic. Send it anonymously. Yes, sir. He hung up. He stood at his window, looking down at the city. The transaction was not complete. He had thought paying his respects at the school was the end of the debt. But seeing her apartment, seeing the peeling paint, the debt was larger than he thought. He was honoring the Miller name. That was all. Across the river, Claire Miller was trying to make dinner. It was a small kitchen. The meal was simple, spaghetti with a jar of sauce. Sophie was at the table. She was not eating. She was drawing. The paper was covered in pictures of a tall, gray stick man and a giant, shiny black car. Mommy, Sophie said, do you think Mr. Cole is a king? Claire paused, the wooden spoon in her hand. No, sweetie. He's just a very rich man. I think he's a king. He's sad, though. Claire stopped. What makes you say that, Soph? His eyes, Sophie said, not looking up from her drawing. They're like the windows in his car. You can see out, but you can't see in. And he doesn't know how to smile. Claire sat down, her own dinner forgotten. She looked at her daughter. Sophie saw things. She always had. Well, he was very nice to come today, Claire said. He's going to come back, Sophie said matter of fact. He has to see Grandpa Mike's medal. Claire's stomach nodded. The medal. He had been serious. She got up and went to her bedroom. In her closet, on the top shelf, was a simple wooden box. It was not fancy. It was plain, dark wood, scarred from a dozen moves. She took it down. She opened it. Inside, on faded velvet, were 2 medals. One was old, heavy, and grand. the Distinguished Service Cross. It was Michael Iron Mike Miller's. Beside it was a smaller one, a Purple Heart. It was David's, her husband's. It had been sent to her, folded in a flag. The box smelled of old wood and memory. This was her life. This box. This tiny apartment. This brilliant, lonely little girl. She heard a noise at the door. The mail slot. She walked into the living room and picked up the single envelope that had fallen to the floor. It was from her building's management company. She opened it. It was a notice of rent increase. Her rent was going up 20%, effective the 1st of next month. Claire's legs went weak. She sat heavily on the worn sofa. 20%. It was impossible. She was already working 60 hours a week between 2 cleaning jobs. She barely made it. This would break them. She felt the tears coming, hot and angry. She had been a fool to feel hope. Hope was a luxury for people like Edward Cole. For people like her, there was only the grind. There was only the peeling paint and the rising rent. She looked at Sophie, happily drawing her sad king. It's okay, Claire whispered to herself, her voice shaking. It's okay. I'll pick up more hours. I'll find a way. She was Iron Mike's great-granddaughter. She was David's wife. She would not break. But as she refolded the letter, she felt a terrible, cold dread. She was a hero too. She was consistent. She showed up. But she wasn't sure if she could finish this. The next morning, Edward Cole's office was quiet. The sun had not yet risen. He was reading a report on a potential merger in Singapore. He had read the same paragraph 4 times. The words blurred. He saw a small, cheap wooden box. He saw a 20% rent increase notice. Ms. Jennings entered, silent as a shadow. She placed a single-page file on his desk. The information you requested, sir. He opened it. It was Claire Miller's employee file from Everclean. His eyes scanned the page. Employee, Miller, Claire. Tenure, for years. Performance, exemplary. No missed days. No complaints. Pay rate, $18.50 per hour. Hours, average, 55/week. Notes, recently declined offer for weekend shifts due to childcare conflict. He stared at the pay rate, $18.50. He did the math in his head. It was a fast, cold calculation. It was a poverty wage. It was nothing. He paid his driver 3 times that. He looked at the note, declined offer for weekend shifts. She had just received a rent increase, yet she was turning down work. Because of the girl. And the donation to the school. He asked, not looking up. Sent, sir. Anonymously, as requested, Ms. Jennings said. The principal, a Ms. Gable, was emotional. She said it would change everything. Edward nodded. He closed the file. He felt the shame again, cold and sharp. He had built an empire, but the great-granddaughter of a hero was scrubbing his floors for $18.50 an hour. And a school's entire future could be changed by an amount he spent on a single business dinner. This was not a discrepancy. It was a moral failure. Ms. Jennings, he said, clear my schedule. For PM. Sir, you have the call with the zoning commission. Reschedule it. Indefinitely. He stood. I am going to pay my respects, he said, more to himself than to her. It is time to honor the debt. At 3:45 p.m., Claire Miller was tying Sophie's shoes. Mommy, are you mad? Sophie asked. She had been quiet all afternoon, sensing the tight, brittle energy in the apartment. Claire sighed, forcing her hands to be gentle. No, baby. I'm not mad at you. I'm just frustrated. With the mail. She had spent the morning on the phone. She had called the management company. A cold, bored voice told her the increase was non-negotiable. She had called 2 other apartment buildings. They had no openings. She was trapped. She would have to call Everclean and ask for those weekend shifts. She would have to find someone, anyone, to watch Sophie. The thought made her feel sick. A sharp, expensive-sounding buzz came from the intercom by the door. Claire froze. No one ever buzzed. She pressed the button. Hello. Ms. Miller. It is Edward Cole. I am here to see the medal. Claire's heart stopped. She looked around the tiny apartment, suddenly aware of the worn sofa, the dishes drying by the sink. He was here. Let him in, Mommy. Let him in. Sophie was jumping, her gloom instantly gone. Claire pressed the button. Yes, sir. Come up. Apartment 3B. She ran to the table, grabbing the rent notice and shoving it into a drawer. She smoothed her shirt. Her hands were shaking. A moment later, a firm, polite knock echoed. She opened the door. He stood in the narrow, dim hallway. He was wearing the same dark blazer as the day before. He seemed to take up all the space, all the air. "Mr. Cole, please, come in." He stepped inside. His eyes swept the room. 1, 2, 3 seconds. He cataloged everything. The small size. The absolute cleanliness. The single drawing by Sophie, now taped to the wall, of the three of them. "You came back," Sophie yelled, running to him. She stopped just short of hugging him. "I told Mommy you'd come." "I said I would," Edward said. His voice was quiet. He looked uncomfortable, like a large animal in a small cage. "The medal?" "Yes, of course." Claire hurried to the bedroom. She came back with the wooden box, her hands trembling so badly she could barely hold it. "Please, sir, sit down." He looked at the worn armchair. He sat on the very edge of it, his back rigid. Claire set the box on the small coffee table between them. She opened it. Edward leaned forward. The afternoon light from the single window caught the medal. He stared at the Distinguished Service Cross. "Iron Mike," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. "My mother told me stories," Claire said, her voice soft. "She said he never talked about it. He just did his job. He saved his men." "My father," Edward said, his eyes still on the medal, "believed that honor was the only thing a man could truly own. Your great-grandfather. He was a man of immense wealth, by that standard." He was silent for a long time. Sophie, sensing the gravity, sat on the floor, her chin on her hands, watching him. Then, his gaze shifted. He looked at the other medal, the simple, purple and gold one. "And this?" Claire's breath hitched. That was my husband's. David, Sophie's father." Edward looked at her. He saw the sudden, sharp pain in her eyes. "He was killed in action," Claire whispered. "When Sophie was 2. He never got to hear her talk." Edward looked from the medal, to Sophie, to Claire, the widow of a fallen soldier, the great-granddaughter of a legend. $18.50 an hour. The pieces clicked into place. This was not a debt. This was an injustice. He stood up. The movement was sudden, making Claire flinch. "Mr. Cole." He did not look at the medals again. He looked at her. "Ms. Miller, you work on my floor. You are the one who cleans my personal office." "Yes, sir. I try to be thorough." "The water filter," he said. Her face fell. "Oh, sir, I am so sorry. I changed it right after you reported it." You," he interrupted, his voice rough, "should not be changing my water filter." Claire was confused. "Sir, thank you for showing me this," he said, gesturing to the box. You have honored your family. I must go." He was already at the door. "Are you leaving?" Sophie asked, her voice small. "You just got here." Edward paused, his hand on the doorknob. He looked back at the small girl. "I have work to do, Sophie," he said. He left. The door clicked shut. Claire stood in the middle of her living room, her heart pounding. The entire visit had lasted less than 5 minutes. She was completely bewildered. In the car, Edward Cole was silent. The Maybach moved through the heavy afternoon traffic. Sam drove, not speaking. Edward stared at the city blurring past. He saw none of it. "Sam," he said. "Sir, call Ms. Jennings. Tell her to get the head of Everclean on the phone. Now." Sam used the car system. A moment later, a voice patched through. "Mr. Cole? This is Gregson, at Everclean. What can I do for you?" "Mr. Gregson," Edward said, his voice cold as steel. "You have an employee named Claire Miller." Yes, sir. I believe she works your building. Is there a problem?" "The problem," Edward said, "is that you are paying the great-granddaughter of Michael Miller $18.50 an hour. This is an insult. Not to her, Mr. Gregson. To me." Gregson was silent, stunned. "Sir, I don't understand. Our pay rates are standard." "They are not. Effective immediately, you will double her salary. You will also give her a promotion to evening supervisor. Her duties will be inspection only. Is that clear? Double her." "Mr. Cole, I can't just." "You can, and you will. The additional cost will be covered by my company, in the form of a service bonus. You will tell her it is a standard corporate promotion for excellence. You will not mention my name. If you do, I will terminate our entire contract. It is a $4 million contract. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir," Gregson stammered. "Perfectly, sir." Edward hung up. He breathed out. The knot in his chest, the one that had been there for days, finally uncoiled. He had fixed it. He had balanced the ledger. "Sir?" Sam asked, looking in the mirror. To the office? Edward looked at his watch. 4:35 p.m. No, he said. Take me home. That evening, Claire Miller's small apartment was filled with a new, unfamiliar sound: laughter. Sophie was dancing around the living room in her pajamas, using a wooden spoon as a microphone. Claire was at the stove, watching water boil for spaghetti. Her heart felt light. The call had come an hour after Mr. Cole left. Ms. Miller? This is Gregson, from Everclean. Claire had frozen, her hand clutching the phone. Was she being fired? Ma'am, I'm calling to congratulate you. Your exemplary performance record has been flagged by our corporate review. We are promoting you to evening supervisor, effective immediately. Claire had sat down, hard, on the sofa. What? And with the promotion comes a new rate. Your pay will be $37 an hour. Your new duties will be inspection and team management. No more scrubbing. You earned this, Miller. $37. She had scribbled the number on the back of the rent notice. She did the math. Her heart hammered against her ribs. It wasn't just enough. It was safety. It was new shoes for Sophie. It was fresh vegetables. It was the rent, paid, with money left over. It was breathing. Thank you, she had whispered, tears streaming down her face. Thank you so much. But now, as she stirred the pasta, a question nagged at her. Corporate review. It was too fast. It was too precise. It had happened exactly 1 hour after Edward Cole stood in this room. He had seen the medals. He had looked at her with those cold, assessing eyes. He had complained about her work just 1 day before. And now she was a supervisor? He had done this. She felt a wave of conflicting emotions. Gratitude, so deep it made her dizzy. But also a strange kind of anger. He had just fixed her, like a broken machine. He had seen her poverty, her family's honor, and he had thrown money at it to balance his ledger. She looked at Sophie. Sophie, who saw him not as a billionaire, but as a sad king. Mommy, Sophie said, stopping her dance. Is Mr. Cole our friend now? Claire dried her hands. I don't know, sweetheart. He's a very busy man. But he has to eat dinner, Sophie said, a perfect, simple piece of logic. A thought, wild and terrifying, sparked in Claire's mind. She was no longer just the maid. He had made her a supervisor. But more than that, she was the great-granddaughter of Iron Mike. She was the widow of David Miller. Her honor, as Mr. Cole himself had said, was immense. She would not be a discrepancy he fixed. She would be a person who said thank you. Sophie, she said, her voice shaking but finding a new strength. Put your shoes on. We're going to go for a walk. But it's dark. We're going to go see Mr. Cole. Edward Cole sat in his vast, gray apartment. It was 7 p.m. His schedule was, for the first time in his adult life, completely blank. He had fixed the problem. He had honored the debt. He had doubled her salary, ensuring the Miller line would not be destitute. The transaction was complete. So why did he feel so empty? He had returned to his fortress, but the walls were thinner now. He could hear the echo of Sophie's laugh in the gymnasium. He could see the tremor in Claire's hand as she opened the box of medals. He had solved her problem. He had not solved his. His life was a sterile, silent room, and he was the only one in it. His private line buzzed. It was the front desk. Sir, I apologize for the interruption. There is a Ms. Claire Miller and her daughter in the lobby. They are asking to see you. Edward froze. Here? He looked around the empty room. The silence was deafening. Send them up, he said. A few minutes later, his elevator chimed. The doors opened. Claire and Sophie stepped out into his private foyer. Sophie's eyes were as wide as dinner plates. The ceiling was 30 feet high. The walls were all glass, looking out over the entire city, a carpet of diamonds. Wow, Sophie whispered. You are a king. This is a castle. Claire looked pale, but resolute. She held her worn coat in her hands. She was not dressed as a maid. She was dressed as herself, in simple jeans and a sweater. Mr. Cole, she said. She was terrified. He could hear it. But she did not back down. I'm sorry to bother you at home. I got a call this afternoon. From Mr. Gregson. Edward stood by the window. He did not move. I trust it was good news. Your record is exemplary. Claire took a step forward. Please, don't, she said, her voice soft. Don't manage me, sir. I know it was you. Corporate review. Excellence initiative. Those are your words. Edward turned to face her. It was a discrepancy. It has been corrected. No, Claire said. She shook her head, and a bit of her fear fell away. replaced by a quiet, burning dignity. My life is not a rounding error, Mr. Cole. My husband's medal is not a discrepancy. You can't just fix it. Edward said nothing. He had no protocol for this. I came here to say thank you, Claire said, her voice trembling but gaining strength. You gave my daughter a day she will never forget. You saved us. I can pay my rent. I can breathe. And I will never be able to repay you for that. She was crying now, silent tears that ran down her cheeks. But I also came to tell you. This isn't a debt you can pay with money. My great-grandfather saved a life. My husband gave his. That's not a ledger. You can't just pay it and walk away. That's not what honor is. He stared at her. She was right. He had tried to buy his way out of the emotion, out of the connection. He had tried to make it a transaction. He had failed. You're right, he said. His voice was rough. It was not a discrepancy. It was an injustice. And I apologize. Sophie, who had been quietly watching, walked past them. She went to the enormous, dark screen on the wall that controlled his life. Mommy, look, Sophie said, touching the blank screen. Mr. Cole's schedule is all empty. He has no more meetings. Claire looked at the screen, then at Edward. He looked tired and incredibly lonely. Mr. Cole, Sophie said, turning to him. You don't have any parameters tonight. No, Edward said. I do not. Then can you come to our house? We're having spaghetti. Edward looked at Claire. She was holding her breath. She was terrified he would say yes, and terrified he would say no. We have plenty, Claire whispered. It's just spaghetti. But you are welcome to it. An invitation. Not a transaction. Not a debt. A simple, human invitation. He thought of his own kitchen, sterile and cold. He thought of the single, perfect bottle of water he would drink before bed. He walked to his wall screen. His fingers, which managed billions, felt clumsy. He typed a new entry. 8 p.m., dinner. Spaghetti. He turned to Sophie. He saw her bright, hopeful face. He saw her mother, a woman of impossible strength, offering him the only thing she had. For the first time, a real, structural change happened in Edward Cole's face. The muscles around his mouth, long dormant, moved. He smiled. It was not a grimace. It was not a data set of one. It was real. I would be honored, Ms. Miller, he said. I just have one condition. What's that? Claire asked, wiping her eyes. Call me Edward. He looked at Sophie. Item 1. We will have dinner. Item 2. I am told you have a list of dad things we missed. We will need to create a new schedule. Sophie shrieked with joy and, for the first time, launched herself into his arms. And Edward Cole, the man who erased his past, held on. He was 45 seconds behind schedule, and for the first time in his life, he was precisely on time. And that's where we'll end the story for now. Whenever I share one of these, I hope it gives you a chance to step out of the everyday and just drift for a bit. I'd love to know what you were doing while listening. Maybe you were listening with a cup of tea, sitting on the porch, or just settling in for a calm evening. Drop a line in the comments. I really do read them all. And if you want to make sure we cross paths again, hitting like and subscribing makes a huge difference. We are always trying to improve our stories, so feel free to also drop your feedback in the comment section below. Thanks for spending this time with me.